My name is Jonathan Davis, and I'm here with Jan Rothney, who's the author of Breaking Free, a guide to recovering from chronic fatigue syndrome and long COVID. So a bit of background on Jan. She graduated with BSc Honours in Psychology and PGCSE in Teaching. She went on to teach and run behavioural therapy at a residential school for behavioural difficulties. Jan was actually subsequently diagnosed with ME in 2003. This came as a result of post-viral fatigue and other health conditions and living in an unhealthy environment. Jan recovered on her own, but a relapse in 2006 made her realise that there wasn't enough to get physically better. She went on to run a clinic for ME and CFS and has worked with 1,000 clients to enable them to recover through her Reset to Thrive recovery program. So, Jan, what, in your opinion, really, is the most important things, or most important facts people need to know about ME and CFS?
So the most important thing is a very physical illness.
Yeah.
It's not to do with tiredness. It's actually the body is being completely shut down because it needed to be shut down for its own protection. So many people are bedridden for a very long time, and some people even die. So it's a very serious illness.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of groups actually, and individuals in the medical world have criticised the name chronic fatigue syndrome, saying that it trivialises the illness. Do you believe that to be the case? And do you believe that there is a general consensus of trivialising the illness in the media or just in general?
I understand their frustration at calling it chronic fatigue syndrome because people associate fatigue with just being tired. And they just say, well, get some more rest, or everybody's tired. You know, I've heard it so many times. People have come back and said, well, everybody's tired. But this is actually completely different. This is actually your body is literally being shut down for protection. So I do understand their frustration. However, the term ME is no better because ME, by definition, means that there is inflammation of the brain and the spinal cord, and there's no evidence for that at all. So I think we have to move away from the whole debate about the terminology and actually focus on recovery.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I feel like an issue that might arise from that is sort of like the general public who have no understanding of CFS would hear term chronic fatigue and they would immediately associate it with tiredness, even though, as you explained, that's completely not the case. So would you say to extent that the semantics of terminology is somewhat important into actually getting awareness and actually getting people to understand more about how serious the issue actually is from a general public sort of perspective?
I think semantics will always be tricky, but it's more important to really get the message out about what it is. So I do think having the pandemic with long COVID, where many people with long COVID have chronic fatigue symptoms, is actually going to have quite an impact on chronic fatigue world, because people have obviously realized that it is real, that people do suffer after a virus. And so I do think that it is going to become more recognized and respected as a medical condition, just as people recognize long COVID as a medical condition. When I say medical, I mean it's physical. There's no actual damage to the body. For people with chronic fatigue and for the vast majority of people with long COVID, there is no tissue damage or organ damage.
So it's
but it is physical.
It's physiological, and is it neurological? Is there any sort of like brain alteration that causes this, or is it, or as in like
The
like just physical?
so it's diagnosed as a neurological condition.
Yeah.
It's a maladaptive neurological condition, chronic fatigue and long COVID. That means that the adaptive system in your body, which is our autonomic nervous system, is malfunctioning. It's actually got stuck in protection mode, and it's either putting us into really high arousal or complete shutdown, where we're just ticking over. There's no damage, we're just stationary ticking over. A neurological illness like MS and Parkinson's is different because there is evidence of damage to the neurological system, to the myelin sheath or lesions on the brain. So that's very different.
So would you argue that the lack of evidence of neurological damage has caused like people in medical world to not like perceive CFS and ME as serious, or as necessary for it to be like to be solved, the issue to be solved as with ME or like other neurological conditions where it's more palpable, like the condition.
Well, I think it's been very frustrating for the medical world.
Yeah,
because
I can imagine.
It's very hard. There is the diagnosis is almost by elimination. So if there is nothing else and you have these symptoms, then it is chronic fatigue syndrome or now long COVID. So I think over about 80% of people with long COVID did not have the respiratory problems, or only had very mild respiratory that they've recovered from. So there's a huge percentage that are actually crossovering with the chronic fatigue symptoms, which are, this body going into high arousal and the shutting down, which causes muscle pain and can be joint pain with fibromyalgia. It would be brain fog, cognitive impairment, because the whole system is shutting down.
Yeah.
And obviously the fatigue. So you can have many, many different symptoms with chronic fatigue syndrome and with long COVID. But for the medical world, they want to be able to find, some sort of damage to the myelin sheath, or they want to be able to find something and they can't find anything. So that's why it is actually, I think once the medical world come around to the fact that it is a maladaptive system, it's the adaptive system, the autonomic system that is not functioning properly.
Yeah.
Then we can start to fly with how to resolve this.
Yeah. So do you feel that like, because like medical world is so fixated on like finding this root sort of like cause in the body and finding, this like alteration to the system, would you say that that because that's not been discovered yet in terms, well, it's not like present in this condition, that like the mainstream media and like commentary have a tendency to downplay like the effects of long COVID, especially now, because like medical world is in a sense like a step behind as well, and actually accepting it as a as a serious condition.
I say, as far as the media, you know more about the media than I do, but my experience of the media and the sense of the media is that they have very little time to get any story across. And they're putting it across to a very wide audience. So I don't think they mean to trivialize it. I think what they do is try and just give a bite-sized bit of information that everybody can understand. And so they simplify it.
Yeah.
They might not want to talk about the physiology in the autonomic nervous system because that's, suddenly people are switching off. I think that's why media have simplified it into bite-sized pieces, just an overview of people have fatigue.
But like,
so I don't think it's their fault.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's media's fault, definitely, because the media can only has to make sure that what they use, terms they use, is very palpable and can be disseminated towards a wider audience possible. But I feel like the issue with making it sort of so like almost dumbing it down, or like making it like less than it actually is, it sort of like unintentionally trivializes like the issue. It makes it seem as, like people.
Yeah. I think there is a lot of unintentional skimming over, and I do think once you get the message out, and that's actually why I wanted to write the book, because not just obviously in lockdown I had time to write the book, but also I just retiring, but because I was so frustrated that sufferers are being told they can't recover, that they have to manage it, and they're being told that by experts and by ME associations. But also that means the experts are seeing people and telling them that they have to learn to manage it, and nice guidelines tell you that. And that's really frightening, because if you just accept that this illness is something we don't know anything about, therefore you have to accept it, then that means people can't recover when they are told things like that. And of course, people do recover. I recovered. Many, many, many people do recover. So it is possible to recover. It's just, I think at the moment there's a mismatch going on where that people need to know that it actually is this maladaptive system, this protective system that is kicked in. It's our survival system that's kicked in. It's a bit like, if any plant or animal on the planet were in harsh conditions or difficult conditions, the plant would have to drop loads of leaves and just go into survival mode to get through the hard times until, it's safe to thrive again. And that's actually what's happening to our bodies. We've been put into tick over mode because the body is detecting that we're in danger, that there is threat, and it's keeping us in tick over mode until it knows 100% that we are safe and we are able to thrive. And that's why the whole book is based on what you need to do in order to correct this system, to put it back into the normal, healthy thrive mode. And that's a completely normal thing. If I just give you a really simple example of this system, if you walked out onto the road and you suddenly saw a lorry coming, you would instantly jump back, wouldn't you?
Of course, yeah.
You do flight,
it's
because it's just instinct, isn't it? It's a reflex reaction. And that's your autonomic nervous system doing it for you. That's the survival system doing it for you. And then when you recognize that actually the danger's gone and it's okay, then your body naturally adapts back into the healthy system. And then you get on with your day and just carry on. You might take a breath just to compose yourself and then get yourself back. And then you just carry on, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's forever. This system is going backwards and forwards, depending on where it's picking up threat or whether it's picking up that we're safe and the environment is nurturing.
So it's sort of like an internal fight or flight situation, you would say?
Fight, flight and freeze is the reptile kicks in. That's the one that is shutting us down.
Yeah.
So freeze is the ultimate play dead mode.
Yeah.
Of survival, which is a really horrible thing to experience, and it's really extreme thing to experience. So this is about teaching people how to get yourself out of that survival system that is running amok. And, the chimp is running bananas. Chimp is the arousal mode, and the reptile is the one shutting you down, the freeze mode. And they've just taken over. So really it's about retraining how to turn that system off. And you do that with a lorry coming at you and turning it off. You do it for hundreds of things. You do it if you spilt red wine on the carpet, you'd suddenly go, and you'd have that instant,
it's
flight
a reactive
reaction.
thing, like humans are inherently so reactive, but I suppose our neurons are they work so quickly, our brains work so quickly, and our bodies have to react to that. So it's trying to get them on the same level and trying to get everything back into a harmonious sort of setting in your body.
So it's just really sad that this condition, we've been trapped in this what they call the stereotypical sickness behaviors, which is the inflammation and the fatigue and the nausea and headaches, etc., etc. And that won't stop until it detects that it is safe to heal. So even down at your cellular level, at the mitochondrial level, it is waiting to know that the threat is gone. So the virus has gone, it's just got stuck in this sickness loop.
Yes.
So it's teaching people how to get out of that.
Would you say that these techniques to get out of the loop that you've say in your book, would you say they're completely universal for any sufferer of CFS, ME? Do you say, as in, do you believe that everyone, if they follow these techniques, by the scripture, would be able to recover in a timely fashion, or
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it is possible for everyone to recover.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about people that have damage to their organs and damage to tissues, which there are a percentage of people with long COVID that have, but even then, they can make huge progress in terms of getting rid of the fatigue symptoms and the arousal symptoms. So I do believe if people could follow it to the letter, then they would get huge improvement and recovery. Because there's actually nothing magical about this book. There's no technique. There are no techniques. It's simply how you would naturally deal with a situation where the body has got stuck and overcoming the protective system.
Of course, yeah.
So they're not huge techniques, teaching people to change the focus and look at to see the symptoms differently is not a technique. It's simply a way of living.
Altering your perspective on the illness rather than actually, set sort of tasks to do. It's more of just alteration of your own perception of what's happening to your body and how to change it. Is that what you think is your more focus?
It's taking resources that you will have used all your life.
Yeah.
That everybody has and has used all their life, and applying it to the illness, which people didn't know was the thing to do.
Yeah.
So I do think anybody is capable or has the opportunity to recover. Obviously, some people, it doesn't really matter how long you've had it. I've worked with people that have had it for 25 years and been housebound and made massive, have recovered. It's not so much to do with how long they've had it, but obviously they would have to really commit. And I personally believe that when you use the tools, you will get recovery.
Okay.
Or you have the opportunity to get recovery.
And on the subject of tools, I suppose, so there's been a recent sort of massive proliferation in the sales of energy supplements, like purporting the essential benefits of natural ingredients such as ginseng in counteracting chronic teeth symptoms. Do you believe that any of these sort of supplements would be beneficial as extra tools to help mitigate these symptoms quicker and to speed up recovery? Or would you say they're more of just a sort of fad that are actually helpful in terms of like people like?
I'm not an expert on supplements, and I don't look at a lot of scientific papers and supplements because my background is teaching health and social care, which was to do with the autonomic system.
Yeah.
I would say from experience that I and hundreds of my clients have spent a fortune on supplements, but actually you have to get the system out of this, you have to get your body out of the protective system, because when you're in the protective system, the body is shutting down, and that includes your digestive system. And so therefore you can't be absorbing nutrients properly when you're in that system.
Address that systematic problem. So would you say that if someone takes these supplements regularly, it's almost as if there's like a barrier there when they're trying to like digest them, and that barrier is due to like the fundamental like systemic issues in the body itself, which can't be fixed through like just like a natural supplement.
Yeah, from my experience and from all of my background, you need to get your body in the thrive mode and actually functioning in order to get the benefits of the supplements. So there's nothing wrong with taking them. I don't think they'll do you any harm at all. And nothing in the book can ever do you any harm. But at the same time, it is better to get your body functioning properly. You know, it is defined as a malfunctioning condition. You need to get your body functioning properly, and then when it's functioning properly, take all the nutrients and supplements that you want.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, I discovered that I needed to take vitamin D3 to help with my response, my immune response to viruses. But I took them once my body was functioning. So my body was working, and then it could absorb the vitamin D3. And actually, it's had a huge impact on my response to viruses and my ability to recover from them. Yeah.
Well, because that's the thing, actually, like from my own sort of personal experience, I've like had like issues with fatigue in the past, and I've always been told to take iron supplements or like sort of iron tablets or whatever, because, you know, everyone would say, oh, the reason why you're feeling like tired is because it's like iron in your body. And even though obviously that is somewhat true, but would you say that the issue really is actually more systemic and it's not can't be addressed through like one alteration in terms of like an increase in like a different, you know?
I think it'd be a good idea if you read the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I do actually believe in the modern world there are so many people teetering on the edge with the, you know, hitting their threshold and constantly hitting their threshold. And actually, you know, at some point when you go beyond the threshold, the reptile kicks in to shut you down. So, and I do think it's becoming a bit of an epidemic in this country and in the Western world for people to be running on empty. And then they wonder why they're susceptible to illnesses and viruses.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that actually. Yeah, yeah. Tough question actually. Would you believe that the symptoms of ME aren't taken seriously by some people due to the fact that the majority of people who have been diagnosed with it are women? And if so, do you believe this to be emblematic of a gender bias pervasive in the Western medical world?
I think that would be a really, really sad thing if it's true.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any scientific research on that. I do think it's possible because we know at the moment that the gynecological problems have got one of the longest waiting lists on the NHS because they're just not being dealt with. Everything else is taken priority. You know, they're not seen as a priority because it is just women. And likewise, when we had all of this scare with the AstraZeneca creating blood clots, well, there was something like 66 cases in 10 million. And AstraZeneca was then, you know, suspended. And yet women on the pill experience far more risk of blood clots.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
But nobody's bothered with that. Nobody even talks about it. It was huge on the news. And it became huge, you know. They took AstraZeneca immediately off the market. That doesn't happen for women on the pill because it's just seen as, oh, well, it's one of those side effects they have to put up with. So I do agree with you that there is something desperately sad in the gender bias to do with medicine. I haven't got the evidence that it is that to do with chronic fatigue, but I really hope it isn't. And it'd be really interesting to have some research on that.
Yeah.
Or to look at research into that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've sort of done like sort of some research on the idea of gender bias in medical order, and I feel like for sure there is definitely an inherent bias in, especially places like the US, where like, you know, medicine is not expensive and we don't have like a free healthcare system. I mean, obviously, I mean here there's also still like a higher tax on like medicine for women essentially than it is for men. But in America, that it's like the disparity is far more pronounced, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say there is. I mean, in my opinion, yeah, a complete sort of gender disparities in terms of I'll definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
But
well, I do think that's possibly true, but I also think because so many medics got long COVID, obviously being on the front line, then maybe there will also be some sort of class bias where suddenly it's being taken seriously because people believe the medics, and if they're saying it's serious, then it must be serious.
I mean, would you say that's class, or would you say that's because of the professional medics? Because they're more perceived
because of the profession.
Yeah, they're more perceived.
They are the experts.
Have an expert opinion. So, but yeah, no, that's interesting as well. I would say that definitely is a class like bias as well, which I haven't really looked into, but that would be like an interesting topic of research actually as well. Yeah. So you talk about like how catastrophic sleep deprivation can be for recovery. Like how much sleep would you recommend someone who suffers from MFS or long COVID? Like how much sleep do you think that they should be getting a night in their recovery period?
Well, it's very, you can't really define that with chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID. One of the things is there's a high correlation between chronic fatigue and long COVID, chronic fatigue and sleep deprivation prior to getting it. So many people hadn't been having restorative sleep prior to being susceptible to viruses or prior to crashing. When you actually are in the early stages of chronic fatigue and long COVID, your body is shut down, you're sleeping all the time. Well, certainly I slept for months and almost 24 hours a day for the first 3 to 4 weeks. So I certainly wasn't getting sleep deprivation. But what I was saying in the book is as you become better, restorative rest is really important. So it's restorative rest is ensuring that you're not taking the chimp and the reptile to bed with you. You know, the chimp is the fight and flight, putting you into arousal and making you feel, oh, you know, what will happen if I'm lying here and that, you know, I'm getting worse and worse and worse. The reptile is literally shutting you down. So you need to be resting completely at ease, completely serene, and recognizing that rest is restorative for you. That when I lie here, I am actually healing. So even though I was bedridden for a long time, whilst I was in bed, I had to interpret this as a good thing, that actually I'm allowing my body to heal. And restorative rest is a very calming, serene rest, which is not what many people do when they're lying down.
I mean, that's
the
problem.
Yeah, it is a big problem.
It's because I mean, especially in our sort of very fast-paced, hyper-capitalist society, it's like rest is seen as something which is, I mean, in some ways it's a privilege to even be able to rest, and that rest is always seen as at odds with, you know, your progress, your your grind in
Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah, I mean that's all I think, especially in like the new generation with like Gen Zs, and like there's such an onus to be having all of these flows of income and all of these different sort of channels of work, and like the hustle or grind culture has become such a huge thing, especially with social media, seeing everyone else doing like all of these amazing things. And if you're someone like suffering from fatigue syndrome and you're trying to get that sort of rest, but you're looking on social media and seeing all of them doing all this work, and then or you've got like sort of existential anxieties of like the fact that they haven't, like they can't put like food on the table, or they can't like afford like their bills with the huge rise of cost of living. Like, do you think there's any sort of like hope for people like who are suffering with this, but are at a point where they can't even like sort of process or contemplate the idea of restorative rest because they're so overwhelmed by their own life and by like everything that's happening around them?
And I think that is a real issue. It's a huge issue. You know, I call my online training program Reset to Thrive.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, so many of us, as well as people with chronic fatigue and long COVID, are simply surviving. And when you are only surviving, your adaptive system is going to go into survival mode, because that's in nature what happens. You know, we are only part of nature, and you only need to look at plants that are in the wrong conditions or animals that are living in the wrong habitat to see what happens when you're living a life that is not nurturing. And I do think for many people, they know this. We all know this. I knew it for years before I crashed. But as a society, we don't stop until we get something really serious, like cancer or a heart attack or a stroke or chronic fatigue syndrome, which is really sad. You know, if I could have one wish, it would be that people reassess life and actually work out that health matters more than anything. And my children said the most extraordinary thing to me when I was very ill, and I was losing my job, and I was losing our house, and I was beside myself, as adults are, you know. And my daughters just said, you know, Mum, we don't care if we live in a caravan, as long as you're healthy. And I just
That's so lovely. But
where have I been for so many years? How have I got so lost? Because, you know, when I was young, I packed my bags and went to America with £60 in my pocket with no ticket home. And you just think, what happened to that person that got so caught up with adulting and paying bills and having the mortgage and everything else? And I can honestly say to you that that was a turning point, because I realized that actually health is number one. And being desperate to pay the mortgage and being desperate to keep the job and everything, you know, if I know some people are absolutely in dire straits, and I really hope that they are getting all the benefits and the food banks and every single thing they can get hold of. For many people, you know, I literally would have lived in a caravan if it meant that I could get rid of all the pressures and all the stresses and all the things that were preventing me from recovering. You know, because you can't recover when your brain detects you're in survive mode. You can't turn off the system that is malfunctioning, that is your protective system, if it thinks you need protecting. So I would really wish that everyone, young people, anyone, could reassess their lives and actually think, you know what, this is really not healthy for me. And people have so much evidence. You know, there's a thing in my book called the General Adaptive Syndrome, which is years old. It's nearly 100 years old, you know. And it was recognizing that initially you feel arousal, but you can go through years and years and years of resistance before your body literally gets to the point of exhaustion, of packing in. You know, you would notice in that time that you are not 100%, that you're having poor sleep, that you're not getting enough sleep, that you are feeling, you know, under pressure to keep going, that you may start to become susceptible to viruses, you might start to have problems with your gut. You know, the gut, so many people have IBS, have intolerances, have skin rashes. All of them are signs that the adaptive system isn't in thrive mode. It's struggling. Your body's struggling to keep going. Just like the plant that has to drop all its leaves to try and survive, you know, the windstorm, or try and survive the floods.
So you would say that there are probably hundreds of thousands or millions of people who already have this maladaptive system, and that I don't even realize, or for them they can't even, they don't have like the capacity, or like the knowledge, or the wherewithal, or like the time to process, like, you know, how to recover from this maladaptive system, or would you say that is a real fundamental issue with the modern society?
I think it's a massive issue. You know, in Helen Peterson calls it, for the millennium generation, calls it forever optimizing. You know, your adulting has become a whole burnout of just trying to keep going, trying to survive. And I do think it's affecting millions and millions of people somebody's benefiting. I mean, somebody must be benefiting from us all running around like rabbits, and maybe global corporations are benefiting, or somebody. But, you know, you just need to look at how many people are literally surviving and keeping going. And I do think that's because in our culture, we don't value health. We really don't value health. We massively value the national health system, which is, you know, the national treasure, is brilliant. But that's when you get so ill that you have to end up in hospital or have to end up getting treatment. It shouldn't be like that.
No.
You know, I really think it's because we live in autopilot all the time. We're just almost like these robotic creatures that are literally in autopilot, getting up, doing what we do, running on the hamster wheel, and then if you're lucky, as you say, crashing into bed and getting a few hours sleep, which probably isn't very restorative because it's full of thoughts of what I've got to do next.
Exactly, it's full of like anxieties and, you know, just like, existential angst. And that's the problem with a lot of people. Like, they don't see sleep as restorative or as restorative. They see it as a necessity that takes them out of their like the hyper-capitalist life, or the hyper, you know, like just extreme like, pressurized like existence.
Exactly.
Well, that is a real problem, to be honest.
And that's, you know, when you listen to it mindfully, when you step out of that, and a lot of my book is about mindfulness, when you step out of things, because 80% of how the brain functions, 80% of how human beings function is in autopilot. You're not making choices. You're not making conscious decisions and choices and choosing. You're actually just running on habits and conditioning. And that's how we're meant to run, because it's very efficient and it's very easy for animals to run like that. But if you step out of that for a minute and actually become conscious and become mindful and look at it as an observer from a distance, you would actually see that this is really not healthy. And actually, I have to do something about this. And if it means living in a caravan, or if it, you know, for many people, it means I'm just going to take off and go and live in a tent in Portugal, or I'm going to, you know, really extreme things. But people have done really extreme things in the pandemic. So many people have got out of cities and moved to the country.
I mean,
away from the rat race.
That's sort of like another question. Like, do you think that the pandemic has altered our view on our own health and like our view on what's important to us? Would you say the pandemic has?
I really hope so.
Yeah.
I think it has made many people, you know, the reason is during lockdown, for many people, you actually, for the first time, had time to stop and think. You had time to be mindful instead of just living on autopilot on a hamster wheel. And that time enabled people to think and prioritize. And many people did make a leap and decided to take off in their camper vans and go to Portugal, or decided to live in a camper van in Bristol, as many people in Bristol are now doing. For other people, I think it's had the opposite effect. I think a lot of people know that's what they want to do, but then they've gone back to work, and all the nurses and doctors and teachers and people in industry are working twice as hard as they did before because they're doing massive catch-up. And, you know, I don't want to get political, but it does seem like the whole system is relying on the goodwill of the population.
It really is. I would entirely agree with that. Like, it's the system. It's so. I mean, I would argue the system is so broken that they're only like, it's not even being fixed. It's just being been propped up by the goodwill of the general population,
It's the
and
goodwill,
it still
and
is breaking at the seams as well.
well, at some point, those people
Mm.
are going to have gone beyond the resistance stage and will crash.
Exactly.
Will be ill and exhausted. And you can be ill in so many different ways, whether it's the immune system or the gut or the autonomic system, the skin. There are so many ways the body shows leakage when it just isn't thriving. You know, it's been taken beyond what it was meant to do. You know, you watch these donkeys on the television that are being burdened, and you feel so sorry that anybody would do that to them. And yet, you know, if you look at people, you can see that actually so many people are being really burdened with so much stuff.
Yeah, and people just like accept it as something that can't be changed, or is, you know, is just a immutable fact of existence in one society, when that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I feel like, yeah,
I don't think that's true. I think ultimately societies have to change.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the meantime, each individual has to make major decisions and priorities and decide that health is number one. You know, I was so fortunate that I recovered because, you know, it was really serious. I was bedridden and immobilized, completely immobilized for a long time. And I was just so fortunate that I understood from having lectured in health and care that I knew it was the autonomic system. I knew it was my protective system that had literally pulled the plug and, you know, short-circuited the fuse. But for other people who don't know that, it is terrifying, really terrifying. And, you know, it was terrifying enough for me. And I was so fortunate that I didn't speak to anybody during recovery, except for my GP, who told me that I would recover. But for most people, they're being told they can't recover.
Yeah.
And, you know, when people get cancer and heart attacks and strokes and something as serious as chronic fatigue syndrome or now long COVID, it's really so sad that we wait until things are so serious for us to actually change our lives. And I actually had a relapse because I didn't change my life.
Yeah.
You know, that's how much we live in autopilot. I went straight back to doing exactly what you were talking about, and was massively susceptible to viruses. And I crashed again. And it was only the third time when I was going under again that I changed my life.
Yeah.
So you can see how powerful this autopilot is when you just get sucked into something.
Of course. Yeah.
And you just don't even feel, you just feel powerless that you can't do anything about it. But what I would say is actually people need to just step out and become much more mindful and really, really put their health as number one. Because if you haven't got your health, you know, having whatever you have, Sky Television or a pair of Nike boots or whatever people have, means nothing. It literally means nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't. Like the only thing is that's important really is our health. But I feel like people like don't see that. They only see it as before.
Can you honestly say? Yeah. Can you honestly say that 24/7 you put your health beyond everything?
No, I definitely don't. And I feel like that's a problem, because I like most people only see health problems as serious when it gets to the point where I'm completely like immobilized, I'm completely unable to to do anything else other than focus entirely on this health problem. Whereas if I had thought about ways to solve like some adaptive like system and like these issues that I'd be having, then the problems could have gone away a lot easier, but like a lot faster. And I feel like, this is why your book would be actually so important for a lot of people. I feel especially now, where our opinion and like our relationship with our own health is definitely altering. And in a way, I think that is positive, but only if we actually like understand that things need to change and our like the way how we process our own health needs to change. And that's why I think your book is very important.
I do think you have to really think about what can I change in my life so that I can be healthier. What can I ditch? What can I get rid of? What can I change? And also in my book, I talk a lot about how many people simply don't have the adulting skills that you need to survive, because you're never taught adulting skills, are you? You know, you're a child and you grow up and suddenly you're an adult. And you're put into this world of adulting without the defense skills that you need. And so there's two parts of my book. The second part is about staying healthy, and one part of staying healthy is about the environment and doing what you can about the environment. But the second part is what do you need to do in order to keep yourself healthy? And so many of us are very compliant and nice people and conscientious, and we do what we need to do because we feel, that's how we're driven. But actually, people who stay really healthy in this crazy world are the ones who do just stand up and say, I'm not doing that. That's unreasonable.
Exactly, yeah.
I shouldn't be expected to do that. And actually, when you learn defense skills to protect yourself, to give yourself boundaries and barriers, you can then stay healthy because you're not going to be overloaded, because you refuse to be overloaded. But of course, people don't do that, because of their habit of being conscientious and hardworking and, wanting to be seen to be professional, and because we are compliant, we were compliant children. But if you learn defense skills, and what I mean by defense is putting a fence up, protecting yourself from overload, from things that are not reasonable. People might be scared they're going to get sacked, or they're scared that people will think that they're not, good workers.
Yeah.
But actually, when we know our own minds, when you know what is reasonable, and when you know what is healthy, and you're capable of saying, actually, I'm not going to do that.
Exactly, yeah.
Because that isn't reasonable. Then,
It's not setting your own boundaries, really.
You have to set your boundaries because, there's that saying, isn't there, that the madmen are running the asylum. And, if you're living in a world that is going a bit crazy, then actually we have to stay mindful and set our own boundaries. So a big part of the book, to stay healthy forever, is to learn skills that I never had. I had those skills in my workplace better than I had in my personal life, in certain conditions. I didn't have them with authority, because I always did as I was told, because obviously, they're my bosses. I had them in my setting of running behaviour centres because that was what I do. It's very easy to set boundaries. in that situation. It's very interesting how people have different boundaries in different situations, and different expectations in different situations. So actually all of the clients I've worked with, bar none, have had to learn survival skills, have had to learn A, to prioritize health, and B, to learn survival skills that they didn't learn when they were younger. Defense skills, so that they could stay healthy. And it is incredible how much bosses and people will respect you when you actually just stand there and say, actually, yeah, I can do that, but I can't do it today. I will get it done tomorrow, or whatever it is. And people will actually stand up and
they respect that, because they'll like understand as well, like their own like flaws in setting those like unreasonable demands as well, and that they'll also like reflect on their own like sort of like demands on themselves as well.
Exactly. And I'll never forget my boss saying to me, you know, I ended up doing 2 full-time jobs for a year. Literally 2 full-time jobs.
Oh, that's a lot.
Which was insane.
That's it, yeah.
It wasn't the reason I crashed, but it certainly didn't help. You know, it contributing. And when I went back to work after I'd had a year off work, my boss said, you should never have taken on that other job. And I said, but you begged me to, because it was a legal requirement to have a special needs coordinator. And there was nobody. And you begged me to do it, you know, because there was nobody to cover. And she said, yeah, but Jan, we weren't thinking straight. That was ridiculous. And, you know, the fact is, bosses are also struggling and also on the hamster wheel. And they're in autopilot and they're desperate to get things done. So actually it taught me a massive lesson that I've got to stay mindful of what is reasonable, because, you know, other people can be asking you to do things that are unreasonable, and they only recognize that in hindsight when they've had time to think about it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Actually, I think that's actually all we've got time for. But thank you so much.
It's been really lovely to talk to you.
Thank you for this interview.
Thank you.
So yeah, so the book will be released on 9th of May. If you would like to pre-order, obviously you can pre-order from our website on Outbound. And yeah, thank you again, Jen.
Thank you. Lovely. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jonathan.
Bye.
Bye-bye.